I'm in very good company.
Hello, welcome back. Thanks
Boss.
for coming along. Hey, Mitch.
Boss, how are you?
Good. We were going to come last week, but I couldn't make it. I had a day of work. So today we're going to do what we said last. We're going to look at some books. Particularly, we're looking at the psychological, emotional, spiritual benefits of the martial arts. We see the martial arts as a great way to fight, and quite often, if you're not careful, it can actually exacerbate your violence problems.
You would have seen that a lot more than me in your time, I reckon.
Well, some clubs you walk in, some schools, some dojos you walk into, and there's a vibration of violence. And to suggest anything else to them is alien to them. They literally, their whole thing is that they want to just be violent, or they're violent people and they just want to become skillful at their violence. But as you know, that's the antithesis of karate. As Gichin Funakoshi said, the art of karate is about the perfection of the character, and if it wasn't, it wouldn't have lasted. And I have a theory about the concept of a warrior. There's a warrior with a capital W and a small w warrior. And a small w warrior is a fighter, is someone who goes to war with a uniform on. But a warrior with a capital W is, look at those circles in my glasses. I'll take my glasses off, eh? But a warrior with a capital W is someone who's fighting the ultimate battle of life, and like Walt Whitman says, I should have grabbed that book.
Oh, yeah, all those quotes.
Yeah, but he wrote a poem called As I Pondered in Silence. And basically what that poem is about is there's a poet who's writing a poem, and a spectre, a ghost comes, and it's the ghost of all the poets that ever lived. And it said, what are you writing about? He said, don't you know that all the poems of all the poets that were ever written are about one theme, and that's the theme of war and the making of perfect soldiers being warriors. And I think that sort of warrior is warrior with a capital W. Yeah, when you're fighting the battle. Yogananda wrote a poem called The Noble New. Think thoughts that think thoughts. Sing songs that none have sung, think thoughts that ne'er in brain have rung, walk in paths that none have trod, give peace, give love, walk in paths that none have trod. I've forgotten. It'll come to me. It's only a short poem, but the last line is and fight the battle of life with strength, brave the battle of life with strength unchained. And that's really what it's all about, is being a warrior. Hey, Rochelle, Matus, Paul, good to see you, man. Marco, Sensei, Mike, how are you? Chrissy's there, Frederick, and Paul Kniep from Germany. So anyway, today, I think last time we were kind of talking about some really valuable books. And one of the books, this is a book that actually, I don't even know if you physically gave me this or whether you recommended it and I bought a copy. But this is a really interesting book that I've taken a lot of notes on. Feelings Left Buried Never Die.
Feelings Buried Alive Never Die.
There you go. See, I haven't got my glasses on.
By Carol Truman. Yeah, it's a fantastic book. And it talks about literally that, feelings that are buried alive never die. And we hold emotions in different parts of our bodies, and feelings, as all beings feel, irrespective of who we are and where we are and so on. And they manifest in different parts of our bodies in different ways and different times of our lives. And there's a lot of value in understanding these things, a massive amount of value, I think, in understanding these things, and to improve our lives, improve our health, and improve our well-being, definitely.
I think Chinese medicine is interesting too, because it connects emotional experiences to organs.
Yes, you've taught, yeah.
And if you think of that and you relate it to this concept of feelings buried alive never die, it makes a lot of sense, And I always talk about guys who have done steroids, and they talk about roid rage. And rage is the emotion. Rage and anger is the emotion attached to the liver. And the liver is the organ which is blown out by excessive
drug use,
because it's the main blood purifier and so on. So isn't that interesting? And it's like the kidneys are related to fear, for example. And when when people are frightened like hell, well, they pee their pants.
And there's others. That's a great example. There's others in that book of, for example, like the lower back. So our spine supports our skeletal structure essentially, and lack of support in life can lead to back issues. Just for example, and how these, whether it's emotional, spiritual, psychosomatic, who knows what, but there are these correlations that exist. And diving into this area, I think, is very valuable if you want a long, healthy life.
Yeah, this is another great book which I read called The Body Keeps the Score, which I guess is very similar in fact to Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And this, it turns out, I didn't realize, but looking into it, Bessel van der Kolk, this book, The Body Keeps the Score, is probably the primary go-to textbook for clinical psychologists who deal with PTSD. And he goes into, it's just a fascinating book. I got it on Kindle, it's not that expensive. But what he goes into is points out that, for example, infants, days-old infants, their brain development can be affected if they don't experience that sense of being hugged and held and touched. And then, of course, the first 4 months and then the first 4 years, and how the brain develops. And if that person, child, infant, has certain experiences which can be quite traumatic, and we often think that they're too young to remember them.
Yeah.
But the fact is, the body remembers, and the brain development is held back. And later on, they do research. They show people who have had these traumatic experiences as a child, and people have what's considered normal brain development, and they show them images of stressful experiences, and the brain waves of the traumatized children are reacting as though they are actually experiencing the event.
Trauma,
They can't differentiate between what is real and what is not real. And so this is why when you see people have meltdowns and you think, come on, get it together. But the fact is, it's not like they're having an overly emotional reaction to something. They're actually experiencing it.
Yeah.
And so to undo that trauma is quite a challenge, So there are a couple of good books.
Incredible books, yeah, without doubt.
Hey, Paddy, good to see you, man. Hope everything's going well down there. Okay, so there are a couple of really, really good books. Another one too, which I don't know, that John DeMartini, this guy, John DeMartini, he actually has written some absolutely fascinating books, I think. And would you believe I ran into him on an aeroplane once? I started to talk to him. I used to do a thing called the quintessential training system, where I would take guys through a series of exercises that would help them, mostly how to set goals and how to use their time well. And I had a good half an hour chat to him on the plane. Absolutely fascinating. And he was on his way to Brisbane to do a series of lectures, and I actually attended some of his lectures, and I got a real lot out. I got to know him reasonably well, and this is a great book. What it does, in essence, if I could sum it up, and obviously it's a big book, so it's going to be hard to sum up, but in a nutshell, what he points out is there are no good or bad experiences. There are just neutral experiences. And what determines if it's good or bad is the charge, the emotional charge that we place on it. So something happens, we exaggerate the degree of impact, we exaggerate it, and we overbake it. An old lady in a car cuts you off, and the next thing you know, you're raging for the next hour. And it's like, dude, give me a break. It was just an old lady in a car, and I think I don't get road rage, but I get angry on the road with some people. I hate it. People who, I just get annoyed with people who aren't courteous on the road. And funnily enough, I then become quite angry at them.
I'm guilty as well. Yeah. And one of my things that I work on right these days is actually just remaining calm the whole time and not attaching any of that inappropriate charge to it.
Yeah, that's true. And then the flip side is that you minimize the event. You don't place enough energy in it. And so, it's just the rent. It doesn't really matter that I'll be late. It's just tax. Hey, I'll get round to it.
It's just my wife's birthday.
Yeah,
it's no big
it's
deal.
Our anniversary.
Yeah.
So John DeMartini, basically, he points out that there is a certain natural state of consciousness, which is a certain level of love and joy and so on. but the emotional charges we place upon events are what drags us away from that. And then he goes so far as to, does the Benjamin Franklin with the line down the page, and you have an experience and you think it's the worst possible thing that could have happened. So he says, well, write down 20 negative things. And I did this with him, with certain events that were going on in my life at the time. And you write down 20 bad things. He goes, all right, now write down 20 beneficial things. What are you talking about? In my head, I'd placed an emotional charge on an event that made it a negative experience. He said, there is no negative, it's just neutral. So if you found 20 dark things, you'll find 20 beneficial things as well. And sure enough, if you rack your brain, you realize that everything balances. It's the nature of the world is that everything balances. Even the law of thermodynamics says that nothing's lost, it just remanifests in another form. So this is really, John DeMartini has written a number of books, and that one, The Breakthrough Experience, is one of the better of them, I think. Very interesting book. Another book which I think is really valuable, and I just grabbed this particular one by Mukunda Stiles, the Yoga Sutras. Alistair Shearer, a good buddy of mine, Jared Boyle, actually I've been chatting with him recently, and he recommended one by a translator named Alistair Shearer, I believe. And that particular one is also an excellent translation. Let me see if I can open it here. This is it. I wish I could show you the cover, but it's called The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and it's translated by a guy named Alistair Shearer. And I've only just started to read it over the last week, and I'm really enjoying it. So I have a number of translations. The Yoga Sutras arguably would be the, if you, for want of a better term, the Bible of yoga. This is the book that defines what yoga is. And the first line of the book is, herein begins an explanation of yoga. Then he goes on to say, yoga is nothing more than the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind waves. So he points out, just like DeMartini is saying, how an event is neutral, but our emotional charges determine the magnitude of the fluctuations. Well, what this book points out is, says yoga is nothing more than calming down that fluctuating mind stuff
and keeping a more balanced, neutral bandwidth.
Yes.
There's that saying that from, I think it's from Autobiography of a Yogi, which we'll go into in a second, but beware the inevitable fluctuations.
Yes, beware of the emotional reactions
to the inevitable fluctuations of the phenomenal world.
That's exactly. One of the most powerful sentences. It's not from the Autobiography of a Yogi, but it's from the author of the Autobiography of a Yogi. Beware of the emotional reactions to the inevitable fluctuations of the phenomenal world. The nature of the phenomenal world as compared to the noumenal world. The noumenal is where there is no change. The phenomenal world is that it's a duality. There's hot, cold, happy, glad, sad, mad.
Good, bad,
yin, yang. Yeah. Okay? So that's the nature of the world. And our brain reacts to it. But what that sentence points out is the fluctuations are inevitable. Happy, glad, Benny the Jet says, happy, glad, sad, mad. I love that. I say yin, yang, good, bad, happy, glad, sad, mad. You got the dualities, and there's that poem, the Samadhi, where it says the same sort of thing, right? The
whole thing is nearly about that, and moving out from the duality, from the storm of Maya, stilled
by magic,
wand of intuition, the present, past, future, no more for me. But then it goes into the present,
past. So what we're talking about, Mitch has been, this is a great book. To me, this is the most influential book that I've read, certainly. I read it back in 77, 78, I think. But anyway, and I read it every year. It's the last book I read and the first book I read every year. And in that, there's a poem called Samadhi. And that poem's pretty amazing. And once a monk said to me, 184, I think.
Like once.
Newer version.
160 something it is.
There we go. So this poem, and a monk once said to me, if I read that poem to myself every day for a year, it'll change my consciousness for life. And so I started to do that. And what you find out is after a while, even as you're reading it, you realize that you memorized it without trying, but it goes on. Love, hate, health, disease, life, death, perish, these false shadows on the screen of duality. It's a very powerful poem. And this book, it's been translated into something like 50 different languages. And the New York Times at the turn of the millennium listed this book as one of the 100 most important books on religion and spiritual stuff of the 20th century. It was written in 1946, and it's just been reaching the New York Times bestseller list regularly ever since. Wow. Autobiography of Yogi, amazing book. And Yogananda also wrote an interpretation of the Gospels. If you're a Christian, and even if you're not, it's fascinating because a lot of people who aren't Christians look at it and go, well, that's all just fairy tales. You read his book, and his spiritual interpretation of it is out of this world, to the point where the Professor Emeritus of Religious Studies at Oxford University said it was the most important contribution to Christianity in the last 1,000 years.
Wow.
It's an absolutely amazing book. Hi, Gary, and Husaria, nice to see you. Okay, so this is a really good book too. This is another one by Yogananda too. It's a very small book. Look, you could read it in an hour and a half. And this is actually a lecture he gave in 1920. And basically what this book points out, and I've actually heard what's his name? Awaken the Giant Within You.
Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins. I actually heard, after 20 years of observation of, is that a good Tony Robbins voice?
You should keep going with that.
After 20 years of observation of the human nature, I've come to the conclusion that everything that we do is driven by two things: a desire to be free of pain and want, and the desire for happiness.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Pleasure. And Yogananda points out in this book, in a very, 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 1920, so there's no guessing where Tony Robbins got it from. He points out that everything that everyone does, whether it's the psychopathic mass murderer or whether it's the philanthropist donating $100 billion of their money, are done for one of two reasons. That is a desire to be free of pain and want, and the desire for endless joy, which we mistake for pleasure, and which he points out that's where all the troubles begin. We confuse ever existing, ever new joy with the short-term experience of pleasure.
Dopamine hit of pleasure.
Yes, that's right. And this is an amazing little book, The Science of Religion. He points out in kind of like a scientific way how actually religion, if you look at the word religion and what it means, actually it's not, you're not talking about the churches and these man-made synagogues. What he's saying is the concept of religion is natural and necessary to everybody, because what it means is the word religion is based on the word which means that which is necessary.
Okay.
So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's a great little book, and I always recommend that to people.
Yeah, you've lent that to me, and that's I know of Tony Robbins' work quite a bit. I've seen his seminars and read some of his things and so on. And then when you said that to me and you said it's from here, I was like, wow.
Yeah. Hey Al, good to see you.
Yes.
So there's some really interesting books, and of course you've probably got your own, but I think there's some fantastic books, and there are other books which are both martial arts and psychological. But at the end of the day, when Gichin Funakoshi says the ultimate aim of the art of karate lies not in victory or defeat, but in the perfection of the character of the participants. Well, that tells you a lot. And things like Kyokushin wouldn't have longevity if there wasn't something else. I was at a BJJ school the other day. My favorite school where I go and train regularly is the Gracie Barra Surface Paradise. And we did a seminar on Monday night with a visiting professor, and he went around everyone and asked them what their reasons were. And it was almost uncanny. It was what people were saying was just like being in a Kyokushin dojo as well. And in Japan, there's a saying, Junin Toido, 10 people, 10 colors. So everyone has a different reason for starting martial arts. Some people want to learn how to fight. Some people want to turn it into a sport. Some people are driven to it by their parents because their parents wants to see them develop concentration and improve their school grades. Other people want to lose weight. Other people are having psychological difficulties, or and they whatever the reason is. The point is, every single person's reason is slightly different, but the benefits they get from the dojo are universal. If there are 10 people for 10 different reasons, all of those people will benefit from all of the other reasons.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of the martial art. It gives you that amazing experience. And in my next book, which is called The Budo Blueprint, I've written about this, and I talk about how there are certain things that we do in karate which are incredibly useful for developing that centered, equilibrated sense of inner peace. And one of the most important things is the left-right bilateral motion. A lot of sports are very one-side oriented. Fair call.
Enormously, yeah.
Most of them. Yep. Golf, you don't see golfers.
Yeah, cricket, tennis, baseball,
that's right.
Boxing.
Yep.
Most martial arts, even. Traditional martial arts are usually bilateral, as in the left and right side. But competing at the higher level, sporting martial arts, generally not. Like you watch a wrestler, they'll shoot in one side.
Yes.
All that kind of stuff. UFC, they'll do the same thing.
You don't see too many switch hitting boxers.
Yeah.
Either southpaw or natural. But with karate and the training we do, where we go left and right, everything we do in the basics, we go both sides, and then we mix it up. Boom, 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 bang. And then we go the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4. We mix it up left and right. And that has actually been shown to have a fantastic benefit of equilibrating the left and right hemisphere of the brain, especially when they're slightly imbalanced due to trauma and stress. It's really, really valuable.
Yep.
And I'm sure from a purely physical training, I talk about left-right balance, but there's also forward-back balance.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, in the Western world in particular, there's so much training of the muscles you can see, right? The push muscles, the horizontal pushing muscles, the vertical pushing, the quad dominant muscles of the leg. And then there's not too much that happens behind, right? The horizontal pull and the vertical pull and the posterior chain. So that's enormous benefit. It's one of the benefits of Kyokushin, particularly the hand techniques of, say, when we're boxing or anything, our hands are in front of the body, as we know. Even tournament fighting, they're the same. But in Kihon and Eido Kihon, there's the retraction in everything. So it's some front and back. And the Hikate, that retracting hand is not a slow thing, is it? It's pulled back quickly. It's just done as fast as the punch it goes out. And that's a beautiful balance for the shoulder from a horizontal push-pull point of view.
Exactly, in terms of trying to recreate the balance that we lose through not being aware of how we favor certain motions.
Yep, and the force that gravity has on us as well. That's a big thing, how we sit, how, text neck, they talk about these days as well. So looking like this regularly, and then you've got gravity acting on that all the time as well. It's quite an issue.
And you look at people sitting in the steering and they're like this.
Yeah.
And they don't even realize it. So you got to literally tuck your chin back and reestablish. I call it the 3 concaves I've mentioned to you.
Yeah.
You got 3 concaves in your body, 3 primary concaves. One between your legs, so that's the perineal concave. One of the diaphragm, the diaphragmatic concave, and one of the chin concave. And we lose that concave, you see. So we got to reestablish the concave, reestablish the diaphragmatic concave by pulling our shoulders back, and reestablish the perineal concave by extending and strengthening the lower spine.
Yeah. And there's injury issues that are related to all of them, without doubt, because there's using the neck concave that you talk about, the cervical one, your nerves, your vertebra, your cervical vertebra just being unhappily bent in shape for long periods of time. It's no surprise people end up with headaches and neck pain and lack of range of motion and so on. So there's a lot to that. It's a simple comment, but there's so much to it, and it sometimes just gets overlooked because it's such a simple comment.
I know, and that's actually almost what Sensei Mike said here. One has to wonder why such wisdom from many sources is ignored by karateka on an industrial scale, and always have been too busy fighting others.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the politics in karate is insane, so it's always ironic. It's almost like religion. We talk about the importance of religion, yet look at the fights that are going on within religions and the controversies that are arising all the time about what's going on amongst the people in the religions. And what Mike says there is true, but the wisdom is there. It's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah,
it's always there. So there are some other books too, which I've brought along. And some of them kind of border on both, of course. So we have, thanks. So, and one of them, which I think is really good, is this one, The Kyogen Way. This book is fundamentally Masayama's philosophy of karate. And he talks about very important subjects in this book. This goes back a bit, 1979, I got this.
Wow.
First edition. How about that? But anyway, aspirations, diligence, courage, success demands courtesy. Parents, that concept of filial piety is very, very important in the East. It's a Confucianist fundamental, and that's based on Indian life, which places great importance in respect for the parents, Reasons for fighting, karate and Zen, breath control and mind control, love and marriage, keeping money in its place, liberation, the ultimate truth. Well, how about that? The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali gets down to it, but ultimately what it says is if you follow a certain prescription, the goal is liberation. So that's interesting. So this is really very interesting. A great little book. The Kyogen Way. I'm not too sure if you're still able to get. I'm trying to get the light of it. I'm still not too sure if you're able to get copies these days, but I'm sure they'll be out there. If nothing else, maybe on as an ebook. Okay. And Masayama always used to talk about the book which was most important to him when he was doing his mountain training and so on was Musashi by Eiji Yoshikawa. Now, here's a little bit of interesting history. The book Miyamoto Musashi, written by Eiji Yoshikawa, was probably the most or one of the most successful novels ever written in Japan, based on the life of Musashi. And this is the book that Oyama Sosai took with him to the mountains for his mountain training. And another interesting piece of history with Kyokushin, Eiji Yoshikawa, the author of Musashi, with Sosai together wrote our Dojo Kun.
Is that right?
Yeah, so Sosai had the concepts in mind that he wanted to put in a very powerful poetic form, and Eiji Yoshikawa wrote it for him.
Wow.
So that's so interesting. And this is why the Dojo Kun in Japanese, actually, it hums. It's just like a chant. It's so beautiful. And that's because Eiji Yoshikawa wrote it. Fantastic book. If you can get it. This was actually gifted to me. I can't confirm, but I'm fairly certain that I had the first copy in Australia because in 1981, I had my family friends from Japan, the Morita families. They came out to Australia and they brought a copy with them. And this was first printed in Japanese. I'm just seeing when it first came out. It says here 85, but that's this softback. I first got my copy in 81. They gave it to me as a gift. They brought it straight from Japan from the Tokyo Book Show because Khan Morita, my good buddy, was in the company that was promoting the Musashi book. What's happened here? It's gone reverse. Is that right? They've all been like that, have they? But anyway, so it's a fantastic book. It is a novelized version of Miyamoto Musashi's life, but it's still fantastic. Now, another book which I've been talking to a friend about recently, and I'm going to actually see if I can dig up. I'll put it on Facebook, actually. I won't try and find it now, but my good buddy Jared Boyle is a writer, and he's interviewed me recently about the Book of Five Rings. Cool. And the interview, very short interview, but he's brought it out. The Book of Five Rings is the book that Musashi wrote himself, and Masayama said this is a very important book, and I first was introduced to it by a friend of mine, Gavin Scott, back in 77 or 78, around then. And this is a great book too. Now, I have to say, when I first read it, a lot of stuff in it didn't make a lot of sense. But then over the years, as my training has evolved and my time in training has continued, I can now read things and it means a lot more to me.
I remember you the first time it got recommended to me was by you at a training camp in the mid-90s, it would have been, I think.
Right.
And so I got it as a teenager and I started reading it. It was just...
That's what happens, yeah.
Now it's a bit different, but still some of it's...
Yeah, indeed. But the thing I love about Musashi is, even though he is regarded quite often as the most successful samurai in Japan, some people don't necessarily like him. They say he's a bit of a brute. He'd go around and challenge schools and, smash someone and move on. But that's life back then. But he was the quintessential Renaissance man, because, this book's been around a long time. But, his sword guard is regarded as one of the most beautiful. And his artworks, he was a great black ink sumier artist and calligrapher. This sort of Japanese artwork that he did, and his paintings and everything are really... This one here is one of the most famous. It captures the tension of this bird sitting on the leaf, and he's watching. If you look right down here, there's a little bug crawling up the frond, and this bird's just waiting patiently about to pounce on it, and the balance of it and everything like that, in every respect. It's a stunning painting, and these calligraphies that he does. This one here, Senki. Senki means the war spirit, or the warrior spirit. Beautiful stuff. So Musashi was a genuine Renaissance man. He wasn't just an amazing fighter. He was also an amazing artisan. I think that's really...
And that's that yin and yang you talk about in development, right?
Yes.
He wasn't just developing his physical ability, he was developing other abilities as well concurrently.
Probably I have to give credit where credit's due. I mean, that seemed to be a samurai quality, that for them, becoming a samurai wasn't just about being able to fight. It was also about being a master of calligraphy, a master of the arts, poetry, recitation, and things like that. Book 5 rings fundamental and business use. There you go. A student of the arts, and more so running a dojo. It fits perfectly. You have to read it 10 times. That's it. That's so true. All right, Al, good to see you, man. Okay, now moving on, I always like to recommend this, and if you've been to some of my camps over the years, what I'll do is I'll gift people an ebook version. But this is a book that I've spoken about often. Nick Hughes, a good Brizzy lad, is a buddy of mine. He's written this book, How to Be Your Own Bodyguard, and I think it should be compulsory reading. Since we talk about self-defense and self-protection, well, self-protection is the soft arts. That's everything you do before you have to pull out your fighting skills. And this book gives you some great ideas. And Nick is one of the most qualified people to talk about it. But he's written a lot of really great stuff in this. And there's a poem in it, which I love. And it's a warrior's poem. Having a self-talk script is a very useful tool. There are many out there, and they can be tailored to your specific goals. One of the best of these that I've seen, and the one that I use all the time, comes from Dennis Martin of Close CQB Services in the UK. And it goes, I will do whatever it takes to win the fight. I may be hit, I may be cut, I may go down, I may feel pain, I may feel fear, but I will turn pain into power, and I will turn fear into aggression. I will keep fighting as long as I have breath in my body and blood in my veins, and I will win, because I will do whatever it takes. To win the fight, I will do whatever it takes to win the fight. That's a very powerful little mantra right there. Very strong. And, look for Nick online and ask him his experiences. I don't want to try and get benefit by standing on Nick's shoulders, but I can tell you he's had some real world experiences. He's the one that I mentioned that got jumped by 22 skinheads, and after he'd maimed 5, knocked out 8 more, 9 ran away. The police didn't know what to do because they hadn't touched him. They didn't know what to charge them with because they hadn't assaulted him or anything. And the stories in that. So
that's a great book.
Oh, good on you, Craig. Yes, I think it's so important that, and like Mike Clark says, is a Japanese saying, "Bun bu ryodo." Bun is the arts and education. Bu is bu from Budo. Ryodo means the both paths, or the dual path, or the double path, or the joint path. So the joint path of both being educated in the arts and being educated in the martial arts. And there, Craig says, that's cool, Craig. You get back into art and illustration. It should balance each other. I think it's really important. Another book which we often bring up is this one by Ian King, which is Mitch's main training mentor, Foundations of Physical Preparation. One of the best books on teaching yourself how to
organize training, organize thoughts. It's such a great book. It's if there's one thing you get for training, I'd get that. It lays out training, all the different qualities, but more important than that, how the different qualities integrate with that, because traditionally they've been looked at horizontally, so going from one to the other, but we all train all qualities concurrently because you don't train anything in isolation. So they have one quality has an impact on the other. So it looks at things from a vertical integration point of view as well as a horizontal integration, and a lot of other thoughts as well. It's just a great foundational book on training.
And fundamentally, when Mitch says qualities, I think he's talking about the physical qualities of speed, strength, endurance,
flexibility.
And flexibility.
But even more than that, it's also the training
tactics,
tactical training, technical training, physical training, and psychological training, because they're not done in isolation either.
No.
All training has aspects of the other involved in it, and so there's integrating them not just horizontally but vertically as well.
Yes.
So there's so much opportunity to have great training with a good framework of thoughts.
And the tactical, technical, and that sort of thing, it varies according to sport too. For example, team sports, in my opinion, the art of tactical strategy and preparation is completely different to an individual sport because everyone has to coordinate with each other.
Yeah.
So different players have different roles.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And there's so much to go. And then some technical and tactical training is very physical. So that comes over to the physical side of things, and you can't just do them in isolation. And some aren't so physical. It's more really technical, and there's not much physicality involved at all. So it's just, it's a whole can of worms, but that's just a great foundational book.
And there's also this other one by Ian King, which it's fairly new for me, so I've only just started to get through it. I find a lot of really interesting stuff. It says how to transfer strength training, but in actual fact, I didn't get it for the strength training transfer. I got it for the fundamental principle of transfer. Yeah. So transfer in terms of specific and non-specific training. Is that fair?
Yeah. So a lot of training, non-specific. There's training like Xian talks about. There's Kion, and then there's fighting. And essentially it's the same with training as well. If you're playing rugby league, for example, there's the game, then everything else is Kion, everything you do outside of it. And we sometimes think the most specific thing we do transfers to the sport most, but it's not always the case. And then we also there's an opportunity cost of doing things that might seemingly be non-specific, but have a huge transfer, a huge benefit to playing the game or doing the activity for us is in martial arts. So yeah, that concept is something that Ian's studied for 4 decades, and he's sharing his thoughts on that in this book as well, which is fantastic.
In my own attempt to become a good instructor, and in my own attempt to find the perfect balance between all of those things, I made an awful lot of mistakes, but I understand the value of this book because that is the art of the teacher, is being able to combine the technical, tactical, the psychological, the physical, and then within the physical, the speed, the strength, the flexibility, the cardio, and all of the endurance. But also I add another one,
sturdiness,
which I call sturdiness, which in any impact sport, it's very important to build a body that is resilient to impact. And that's very important too. So these sort of books, if they were around when I first started, I would have been wrapped. This is a more recent one by Ian, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's probably his most recent work. But just on that topic, Xian, if these books are out, you've been wrapped. But Ian talks about this a lot too. He says he's kind of glad that none of these training stuff was around when he started in the late 70s, early 80s, because it forced him to think and experiment like you've done. And you can't get all that thinking and experimentation just in a book. You have to have trained. You have to, like Solso talks about, there's only one secret: sweat. And that's sort of what you're talking about as well, having all these experiences. And you can quickly now decide, if something's valuable or not.
Yes.
But you can't do that just in a book. And we live in a world today where too many people, especially with training, just think all the answers are in a book.
Yeah, I agree.
There is some answers in a book, but they're not all there.
Yeah, but all you can do with a book is absorb the information and test it yourself and create your own determinations based on your own experience, really. And this is so, yeah, look, 2020 hindsight's a wonderful thing. And to imagine that if I had these books back in the 80s and 90s, things would have been different. Maybe they would have been. Maybe I didn't think of it, but that's a good point, in that without those books, it forced me to base my training for the Uchideshi and training for the dojo on a whole series of experiences that I had over time.
And what you studied at Union, that as well.
Yes.
There's two other great books that I want to share. The first one is Budo Blueprint, which is essentially a training diary. And Xian's talked about great training books today. For anyone in training, and I'm sure you'll attest to this, not just because you're the author of it, but your training diary is the single best book you can read. It's the best training document in the world. And every athlete I work with, everyone I work with has a training diary. And it doesn't matter if it can be something as wonderful as this. And if you haven't got this, I highly recommend checking it out. There's different sections for training sessions, to log in personal details, for goals. There's so many great concepts in here on the 7 stages of Kumite, and concepts to train by, and grappling formulas and so on. But it can be as simple as an exercise book as well, right?
Yes.
And that diary that you have of your training is everything. There is no better book than your training diary. And I'm not sharing this as a martial artist to you all, because most of you are far more competent than me. But as a coach talking to athletes, I cannot stress this enough. The shortest pencil is better than the longest memory.
That's a cool saying.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful saying, and it's so true. And it doesn't matter how you scribble it. I've got my own shorthand for my own training diaries. I've got them going back to the early 2000s. And I can't stress the importance of them enough. The correlations you'll see are just phenomenal. So please get a training diary. And the other book is this one, The Budo Karate of Masuyama, written by, I can't remember who this is written by.
But
anyway, it looks like a great book. And it is an absolutely amazing book. The first edition is a collector's item these days. And this second edition, or the updated edition, is just, we first wrote it, 30-something years ago? 35 years ago. So there's 35 years of additional content in this book, and it is absolutely incredible read. And I love it from the perspective that Xian was just talking about today. There's a physical side of training, obviously, but then there's a way we conduct ourselves and the philosophical side. And I love the subtitle to it, Philosophical Foundations of Japan's Strongest Fighting Art. And there's so much wonderful philosophy in here, and quotes and so on, that, and I'm sure everyone on here, most of the people being Kyokushin, will have read this book and loved it. And the quick story I'll give to it is, I first got this book when I was 15 years old as a birthday present or Christmas present from my mum when I started Kyokushin. And the quotes in it, I didn't realize until I reread it again in my late 30s, early 40s, sort of having had just reread it again when you were doing your second edition and going through it all, and made me realize how much of an impact that book's had on my life. I didn't kind of realize just how much of an impact it's had on my life in different areas. So just a phenomenal read, and you can get it at budokarate.com, obviously. Highly, highly recommended.
Is that $50?
I had to force him to get these out, because I know that he probably wouldn't bring them up in this video. So that was purely my doing.
Good on you, but thanks for that. Yeah. And like Mike says there, Sensei Mike Clark, he points out that there is no better teacher than experience, and it's very easy in modern day with the internet the way it is to go online, find a technique, and then feel as though you have mastered it through osmosis. But it doesn't work like that. You can see a technique and completely have no idea. I was at a seminar not too long ago, and I wasn't really invited to teach anything, so I just participated. But one of the instructors there decided to do a session on grappling, and the takeaway from it was that I swear the only grappling he had ever done in his life was go online the night before and find some stuff. And anyone who's experienced grappling knows that seeing's not believing, feeling is, as Benny the Jet says. So I think, like Mike says there nothing can take the place of experience.
But you can only say that and recognize that because you have so much experience.
Well, yeah, I guess.
And there's so many people in the world without experience that someone without experience can convince someone they have experience because other people don't have experience.
Yeah.
It's this weird sort of cycle that can happen. So
That's right. Yeah. You need to get the updated. You got the other one at 16. Cool, Craig.
read it
Anyway,
regularly. Yeah,
yeah.
it's such a wonderful book.
Well, look, that's it. That's just a handful of books. But, we started out, we were talking about the psychological benefits, the emotional benefits of training. And it's not just the whole notion of reading a karate book. It's the notion of, Mike ties it well there, getting in the dojo. And like also says, the only secret is sweat. You get in there and you experience it. And you experience it again and again and again, and some things just start to click, and then without you realizing it, they start to have an impact on your brain. You can't see it, but the people around you can. So I think nothing beats training, nothing beats getting in the dojo. And look, I love my grappling as well. I love the BJJ, but the kiais in karate, the usas, the kiais, the left and right, repetitious motion, these sort of things, I think really are incredibly beneficial for equilibrating an unequal brain. So the benefits of the martial arts in general are endless, and if nothing else, let them teach you to equilibrate the emotional reactions to inevitable fluctuations. Exactly. So thanks for that, guys. Thanks, Paddy. Good to see you. I hope you enjoyed it. Mitch, appreciate you coming along all the time. And please, if you have an opportunity to get back, have a look at those books. Grab some of those books. I swear you can get them all on Amazon.com perhaps. But anyway, just thought we'd do a chat today rather than a physical day. So good on you, everybody. Thank you. Appreciate everybody coming along, and my Patreon family. By the way, if you're not if you're watching this and you're not a subscriber, please jump on. Help me. I'm aiming for 10 million subscribers. I've only got 9,998,300 to go.
Nearly there.
Yeah, nearly there. Just a step away. But anyway, subscribe, hit the little bell, hit the notification bell, and my Patreon family. You have no idea how grateful I am for everything you do, because I know being a Patreon subscriber is not necessary. You pretty well get everything online for free. But the Patreon subscribers have really helped me get through a lot of this and bring it to you. The microphone, the lights, even the computer, I got through the kind donations of people on Patreon. So if you're not a Patreon member, maybe go along to Patreon, look me up on patreon.com, and away we go. Good on you. Thanks for coming, everybody. Look forward to seeing you next week. Us.